On the evening of January 24th, 2023, in a house on Summer Street in Duxbury, Massachusetts, a woman ordered takeout from a restaurant called 3V in Plymouth. She called the CVS pharmacy about children's medication. She opened Apple Maps on her phone. She typed the address of the restaurant. She calculated how long the round trip would take. She noted the time, and then she texted her husband Patrick and asked him to go pick up the food and the medicine. Patrick Clancy left the house. Prosecutors say that in the window of time Lindsay Clancy had just calculated using Apple Maps, she went to her 3 children. Cora was 5 years old. Dawson was 3 years old. Callan was 7 months old. Prosecutors say she used exercise resistance bands to strangle all 3 of them, one by one, in their own home, while their father was at a restaurant in Plymouth picking up dinner. When Patrick Clancy returned home, he described silence, a house that should have had children's voices in it. He moved through the house. He found blood on the second-floor bedroom. He found an open window. He ran outside. He found his wife in the backyard, conscious, with cuts to her wrists and her neck. She had jumped from the second-floor window after the children. Patrick ran to the basement. His 3 children were on the floor. Exercise bands were still around their necks. He was heard screaming, and these are the exact words investigators documented. "She killed the kids." Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead that night. Callan, 7 months old, was airlifted to Boston Children's Hospital on life support. He died 3 days later, on January 27th. Lindsay Clancy survived the fall from the window. She suffered severe spinal injuries that left her paralyzed from the waist down. She has attended every court hearing since, from a wheelchair, virtually, from the psychiatric hospital where she has been held since May 2023. She is charged with 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of strangulation, and 3 counts of assault and battery with a dangerous weapon. Her defense is that she was suffering from severe postpartum psychosis, that she had been prescribed 13 different psychiatric medications in the 4 months before the murders, that she heard a male voice commanding her to act, and that she bears no criminal responsibility for what happened on night of January 24th, 2023. The prosecution says she planned it. The Apple Maps search is their evidence. Tonight, the complete case, the children, the nurse who loved them, the medications, the male voice, the Apple Maps search, the husband who forgave her, the trial beginning in July, and the question that has divided America since the night this happened. Was this murder, or was this the most catastrophic medical failure in modern American psychiatric history? Every crime leaves a record. Tonight, we read it. Subscribe, like, share, and turn on the notification bell for more real true crime stories on the Guilt Ledger. Before the insanity defense and the medication records and the legal arguments that will fill a Plymouth Superior Court for weeks beginning this July, 3 children deserve to be known, not as victims in a legal case, as children who were alive and small and entirely dependent on the adults around them to keep them safe. Cora Clancy was 5 years old. She was the eldest. By every account, she was a bright, energetic, joyful little girl who had just started to discover the world in the way that 5-year-olds do, with complete curiosity and complete trust. She had gone to a pediatrician appointment earlier on the day she died. Her mother had taken her. They had played in the snow that afternoon, Cora and her brother Dawson and their mother, in the yard of the house on Summer Street. Photographs from the family's social media show a child who smiled with her entire face. She was 5 years old. Dawson Clancy was 3 years old. He was the middle child between his older sister and his baby brother. 3 years old is an age of enormous personality, of specific preferences and strong opinions and a growing understanding of the world. He had played in the snow that afternoon, too, with his mother and his sister, in the yard of the house that would become a crime scene that same evening. He was 3 years old. Callan Clancy was 7 months old. He had not yet learned to walk. He had not yet said his first word. He was 7 months into a life that his parents had brought him into and had every expectation of watching unfold. He was 7 months old. Patrick Clancy, the father who came home to find them, gave an interview to The New Yorker in October 2024. He said something that belongs in this ledger and that belongs in the conversation about this case at every level. He said, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." He said he forgave her wife. He said he did not express anger towards her. He wanted people to understand what postpartum psychosis is and what it can do. That statement from Patrick Clancy does not resolve the legal question of whether Lindsay Clancy bears criminal responsibility for the deaths of Cora, Dawson, and Callan, but it tells you something essential about the human beings at the center of this case. A father who lost his 3 children chose to speak about forgiveness. That is not nothing. That deserves to be heard before anything else in this script is considered.
Lindsay Marie Clancy was born in 1990. She grew up in Connecticut. By every external account, before January 2023, she was exactly the kind of person that nobody associates with the worst crime a parent can commit. She was a labor and delivery nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the most prestigious hospitals in the United States. She helped bring other people's children into the world. She was trained in maternal health. She understood pregnancy and delivery and the biological and psychological changes that follow birth at a clinical level that most people never reach. She and Patrick Clancy had been together for years before marrying and settling in Duxbury, a quiet, well-established coastal community south of Boston. Patrick worked in a scientific field. They built a life that looked, by every external measure, like a healthy and loving family. 3 children, a beautiful house, a mother with a medical career she was proud of. Photographs on their family social media showed ordinary family joy, snow days, birthday parties, the documented small moments of a life being lived fully. What was happening beneath that surface in the months leading up to January 24, 2023, is the center of the entire case. After the birth of her 3rd child, Callan, in June 2022, Lindsay's mental health deteriorated in ways that were documented, treated, escalated, and, the defense argues, catastrophically mismanaged by the medical system she had trusted with her care. She was seen by 2 psychiatrists. She self-admitted to McLean Hospital, one of the most respected psychiatric institutions in the country, less than 3 weeks before the murders, from January 1st to January 5th, 2023. Hospital staff discharged her. They documented that she was not a danger to herself or others. In the 4 months between Callan's birth and the night of January 24th, she was prescribed 13 different psychiatric medications: Zoloft, Prozac, Valium, Ativan, Klonopin, Trazodone, Seroquel. 13 different pharmaceutical compounds in a 4-month window following her 3rd childbirth. Her defense attorney, Kevin Reddington, has stated publicly that this level of prescribing was catastrophically inappropriate and that the medications themselves, including known side effects of homicidal and suicidal ideation, were a direct cause of what happened. In the days before the murders, Lindsay told people close to her that she had been hearing a male voice. Court documents revealed she had written in her journal about thoughts of harming her children.
She told her husband she was having suicidal ideation. 3 weeks before the murders, she checked herself in to psychiatric care voluntarily. She was released. She was sent home to her children. The question of what the medical system owed Lindsay and what Lindsay owed her children is not one question. It is two different questions, and this trial will attempt to answer both. The documented record of January 24, 2023, begins in the morning. It is important that you hear how ordinary this day started, because the contrast between how it began and how it ended is the detail that makes this case impossible to look away from and impossible to fully process. In the morning, Lindsay Clancy took Cora to a pediatrician appointment, routine, a well-child visit. She brought her daughter to a doctor's office and sat in a waiting room and answered questions about her child's development and health. After the appointment, she came home. In the afternoon, she took Cora and Dawson outside into the snow. They played in the yard, a mother and her 2 children on a cold January afternoon in Massachusetts, playing in the snow outside their house. These are the last hours anyone outside the family has documented of Lindsay's day. As the evening moved toward evening, the documented record shifts to her phone. She called 3V Restaurant in Plymouth to order takeout for the family. She called CVS at 189 Summer Street in Kingston to ask about children's stool softener medication. She opened Apple Maps. According to court documents, she used Apple Maps specifically to determine the time it would take to travel from their home in Duxbury to the restaurant in Plymouth and back. She noted the window. Then she texted Patrick, who was working in his home office in the basement, and asked him to go pick up the dinner and the medication. Prosecutors say what came next was deliberate and calculated. With Patrick's travel time measured and noted, Lindsay Clancy went to her children. She used exercise resistance bands, the kind used for home fitness, ordinary objects found in millions of households, to strangle Cora, Dawson, and Callan, all 3, in the same house where they had played in the snow that afternoon. When Patrick returned home, he described what the court documents call silence, a house that should have had sound in it. He moved through the first floor. He went to the second floor. He found the bedroom door locked. He found blood on the floor. He found an open window. He ran outside. He found Lindsay in the snowy backyard, conscious, with cuts to her wrists and neck, having jumped from the second-floor window after the children were dead. He ran to the basement. He found Cora, Dawson, and Callan on the floor with exercise bands still around their necks. Investigators documented his words as he made that discovery. She killed the kids. They were the first words spoken in the official record of this case. The defense does not dispute the sequence. Lindsay has offered in recent court filings to formally admit she killed her children. What her defense disputes, completely and entirely, is that she bears criminal responsibility for any of it, because of the male voice she heard, because of the 13 medications, because of a mind that was no longer her own. The defense of Lindsay Clancy rests on a single foundational argument: that the person who strangled Cora, Dawson, and Callan from the night of January 24, 2023, was not Lindsay Clancy, not the woman who worked as a labor and delivery nurse, who played in the snow with her children that afternoon, who called the restaurant to order dinner. It was a mind that had been chemically dismantled by 13 psychiatric medications prescribed over 4 months, that was experiencing a psychotic break so complete that she had lost the capacity to understand what she was doing or that it was wrong. The 13 medications are not in dispute. Court records confirm them: Zoloft, Prozac, Valium, Ativan, Klonopin, Trazodone, Seroquel. plus 6 additional compounds across 4 months following the birth of her youngest child. Defense attorney Kevin Reddington described the prescribing as placing his client on the road to hell. He has stated that the combination of medications, some of which carry documented side effects, specifically including homicidal ideation and suicidal ideation, created a biochemical environment in which Lindsay Clancy's perception of reality was fundamentally destroyed. The male voice is the most discussed and most contested detail of the defense's account. Lindsay Clancy has stated through her legal team that in the period before the murders she was hearing a male voice, that the voice was commanding her. Court documents reveal she wrote about these experiences in her journal. She told people she was hearing things. This is consistent with the clinical presentation of postpartum psychosis, a condition characterized by hallucinations, delusions, extreme confusion, loss of touch with reality, and in its most severe presentations, commands to harm. 3 weeks before the murders, Lindsay Clancy voluntarily admitted herself to McLean Hospital. She told them what was happening. Hospital staff evaluated her. They determined she was not a danger to herself or others. They discharged her. She went home to her children. Patrick Clancy has since filed a civil lawsuit against her former medical providers, alleging catastrophic failure in diagnosing and treating her mental health condition. His lawsuit claims she was over-medicated to the point of hearing voices, and that the medical professionals who bore responsibility for her care failed her completely. The prosecution's counterargument is precise and specific. They point to the Apple Maps search. They point to the phone calls to the restaurant and the pharmacy. They point to the calculated timing of Patrick's errand. That a woman in the grip of a genuine psychotic break, whose perception of reality was completely destroyed, does not use navigation software to calculate how long she has before her husband comes home. That level of planning, they say, is not psychosis. That level of planning is premeditation.
In any true crime case, the story that gets the least attention is usually the most human one. In the Lindsay Clancy case, that story belongs to Patrick Clancy, the man who came home to a house that had gone silent, who found blood on a floor and an open window, and his wife in the snow and his children in the basement, who screamed the words that opened the official record of this case, and who, in the years since, has chosen to do something that almost nobody in his position has ever done. He chose to forgive her. Patrick Clancy released a statement in the days after the murders that stunned the people who read it. He asked people publicly to find it within themselves to forgive Lindsay. He said he had. He said he was standing by her. He acknowledged that investigators were looking at postpartum psychosis as a factor. He said that what happened was a tragedy for his entire family, including his wife. That statement, released within days of losing all 3 of his children, was one of the most remarkable things any person has said publicly in any true crime case in recent memory. In October 2024, Patrick Clancy gave an extended interview to The New Yorker. In that interview, he elaborated on his position with a clarity and a humanity that reframes everything about how this case should be understood. He said, "I wasn't married to a monster. I was married to someone who got sick." He said he had been concerned in the weeks before the murders that Lindsay might be experiencing withdrawal from an anxiety medication. He said he had told a family friend about that concern. He said he watched his wife deteriorate and did not know how to stop it. He had believed the doctors. He had believed that McLean Hospital's assessment that she was not a danger to herself or others was correct. He had no reason not to believe it. Patrick Clancy is not testifying against his wife. He has filed a civil lawsuit against her medical providers, the doctors, and the institution he believes failed her.
He's directing his legal action at the system, not at the woman who killed his children. That distinction is extraordinary. It is also legally significant, because a husband who publicly supports an insanity defense and attributes the deaths of his children to medical failure rather than to the criminal intent of his wife is not a small thing in a courtroom. He lost Cora at 5. He lost Dawson at 3. He lost Callan at 7 months. And he stood up with injuries to his voice that people could hear in every interview, and told the world that he forgave the woman who killed them. Whatever this trial ultimately decides, that choice belongs in this ledger permanently. The trial of Lindsay Clancy is scheduled to begin in Plymouth Superior Court in July 2026. It will be one of the most consequential criminal trials in Massachusetts history. Not because of the celebrity of the parties involved, but because of the legal question at its center. That question is one that American courts have wrestled with for over a century and have never fully resolved. When does a mental state become so severe that it removes criminal responsibility for an act? And who decides where that line is? Lindsay Clancy is pursuing an insanity defense, formerly known in Massachusetts as lack of criminal responsibility. Under Massachusetts law, a defendant is not guilty of a crime if, as a result of a mental disease or defect, they lacked the capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of their conduct or to conform their conduct to the requirements of law. Her defense attorney, Kevin Reddington, filed formal notice of this defense in December 2024. If the jury accepts it, Lindsay Clancy would not go to prison. She would be committed to a state psychiatric facility where she would come up for periodic review to determine whether she could safely return to the community. The prosecution is fighting the defense on every front. They rejected a defense motion to split the trial into 2 phases, one addressing the acts and one addressing criminal responsibility. A judge denied that motion. They have also rejected a recent defense proposal for Lindsay to formally stipulate, to officially admit in writing that she killed her children, in exchange for focusing the trial entirely on her mental state. Prosecutors stated in their filing that they will not agree to any stipulations of fact regarding the violent and painful murders of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, or Callan Clancy. They want the full evidence presented to a jury. They want every detail in front of 12 people. That detail, the Apple Maps search, is the prosecution's most powerful single piece of evidence. It is the detail that prosecutors have highlighted in every filing and every public statement about this case. Their argument is direct. A person experiencing a genuine psychotic break, whose grip on reality has been completely destroyed, does not calculate travel times, does not time a window, does not execute a plan that requires knowing exactly how many minutes she has before her husband walks back through the door. That is not the behavior of a mind that does not understand what it is doing. That is the behavior of a mind that understands exactly what it is doing and is managing the logistics of doing it without being discovered. The defense's response is equally direct. They say that postpartum psychosis does not announce itself like movie madness. It does not always manifest as confusion and incoherence. It can present alongside functional behavior, while the underlying break from reality is complete and catastrophic. And they say that no woman with a reason to live, with a husband and a life and a career she loved, would ever choose to do what Lindsay Clancy did. When the Lindsay Clancy case became a national news in January 2023, it ignited a conversation about postpartum mental health that had largely been absent from mainstream American discourse. Not because postpartum depression and psychosis are rare, they are not, but because they are chronically underfunded, undertreated, underdiagnosed, and surrounded by a cultural silence that causes mothers to suffer without seeking help and medical systems to fail them without consequence. On TikTok and Instagram and across social media, in the days and weeks after the Clancy story broke, thousands of mothers spoke publicly about their own postpartum experiences, about the darkness they had felt and kept silent, about the thoughts they had not reported to their doctors because they were ashamed or afraid, about the gap between the medical system's attention to their physical health and its attention to their mental health in the months following childbirth. The Lindsay Clancy case became the breaking point for a conversation that millions of women had been waiting for someone to begin. Several bills were introduced to the Massachusetts state legislature following the case, bills aimed at mandatory postpartum mental health screening, improved access to psychiatric care for new mothers, and clearer protocols for managing postpartum psychosis specifically. Whether those bills passed or failed, the fact that they were introduced reflects what this case did to the public consciousness around maternal mental health. None of that legislative activity and none of that public conversation brings back Cora, Dawson, and Callan Clancy. 3 children are dead. Their father is raising himself alone through a grief that has no roadmap. Their grandmother and aunts and uncles and cousins have empty spaces at every table where 3 children should have been sitting. The societal conversation about postpartum psychosis is necessary and overdue. It is also entirely separate from the question of whether Lindsay Clancy bears criminal responsibility for what happened on January 24, 2023. Both things are true simultaneously. The conversation needed to happen, and 3 children are still dead. Those 2 realities exist in the same space and do not cancel each other out. As of April 2026, the Lindsay Clancy case is at one of its most active and most consequential moments since her arrest in May 2023. The trial is confirmed for July 2026 in Plymouth Superior Court. But in the weeks immediately before this episode was recorded, a significant legal development changed the shape of what that trial will look like. Lindsay Clancy's defense team filed a motion asking the court to allow her to formally stipulate, to officially admit in writing that she killed Cora, Dawson, and Callan. The purpose of that stipulation would be to remove the question of whether she committed the acts from the jury's consideration and to focus the entire trial exclusively on the question of her mental state at the time. In other words, the defense was proposing to tell the jury up front, yes, she did it. The only question you need to answer is whether she was criminally responsible when she did it. Prosecutors rejected the proposal completely and in explicit terms. Their filing stated that they will not agree to any stipulations of fact regarding the violent and painful murders of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, or Callan Clancy. They want the evidence presented. They want the Apple Maps search in front of the jury. They want the phone calls to the restaurant and the pharmacy in front of the jury. They want the calculated timing of Patrick's errand in front of the jury. They believe that evidence speaks directly to premeditation, and they are not willing to allow a stipulation to remove it from the proceedings before 12 people have a chance to weigh it. The judge has sided with the prosecution. The trial will proceed with the full evidence presented. Lindsay Clancy will attend in person, in her wheelchair, from Duxbury Hospital transport for the first time since her February 2026 hearing. The jury will hear about the 13 medications and the male voice and the clinical history of postpartum psychosis. They will also hear about Apple Maps, both in the same room at the same time. Lindsay Clancy is currently held at Duxbury State Hospital for mental health care. She has been there since May 2023, more than 3 years as of this episode. She has never been in a jail cell. She has been in a psychiatric treatment facility. Under Massachusetts law, if she is found not guilty by reason of insanity, she would be committed to a state facility where her release would require periodic review by a psychiatric board. She would not walk free. She would be treated, and she could eventually be released if the board determined she was no longer a danger. That outcome is what prosecutors are fighting to prevent. That outcome is what the defense is fighting to achieve. Here is what the ledger of Lindsay Clancy says when you read every page of it. It says that on January 24, 2023, a woman played in the snow with her children in the afternoon. She took her daughter to the pediatrician that morning. She ordered takeout for the family that evening. She opened Apple Maps on her phone. She sent her husband to pick up dinner, and then, while he was gone, Cora, Dawson, and Callan Clancy died in the basement of their home on Summer Street in Duxbury, Massachusetts. It says that a man came home to silence, that he found blood and an open window, that he found his wife in the snow, that he found his children with exercise bands around their necks, that his first words, screamed, documented, placed in the official record of this case, were, "She killed the kids." That this man then gave a public statement within days asking people to forgive his wife, that he told the New Yorker, "I wasn't married to a monster, I was married to someone who got sick." It says that Cora was 5, Dawson was 3, Callan was 7 months. It says their names because they deserve to be named. Cora, Dawson, Callan. 3 children who played in the snow with their mother on the last afternoon of their lives. It says that a trial beginning in July will attempt to answer the hardest question a jury can be asked to answer. Not whether she did it, she has offered to admit that she did, but whether she was there when she did it. Whether the person who used Apple Maps and exercise bands and a calculated window of time was the woman who loved those children, or a mind so completely dismantled by 13 medications and a voice no one else could hear that criminal responsibility cannot attach to what her hands did. That question does not have a clean answer. American law will attempt to find one anyway, in a courtroom in Plymouth, Massachusetts, beginning in July 2026. I will be there for every development. Subscribe to the Guilt Ledger. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you believe Lindsay Clancy should be held criminally responsible for the deaths of her children? This is the most important comment section this channel has ever opened. Let us have the conversation.